Howdy y'all, I'm Ice Gold, and today I will be ranking the 19 worlds in Wizard 101. This includes the 16 main storyline worlds, as well as Grizheim, Wisteria, and I'm also counting Winter Tusk as its own separate world, even though it's part of Grizheim, but, you know, they're two different things. So, this is just my ranking. This is not objective. You can agree or disagree. Feel free to let me know in the comments. And let's go ahead and get started. So coming in at number 19, the very bottom spot, is Grizheim. Now, Grizheim, it ain't all that. It barely gives any XP. The lore's kind of cool, but you know, if Winter Test didn't exist, there would be no reason to do this world. So it honestly feels long for a world that only has, you know, 4 areas: Severstad Pass, Miracom Keep, Vigrid Ruffland, and Ravenscar. But it really feels long. And I mean, for some of these, it's really hard to do at its intended level. Like down in Nidavellir, where you fight Jotun and his brothers, you can choose to either fight Jotun and his brothers all at once, or you can choose to do his brothers' individual dungeons on the left and right here. And these dungeons, you know, they are not easy either. I'm asleep, and I mean, okay, one of them is a giant labyrinth, and then the other is you have to fight. I think it's Helgrin Warren on the left side. Winterdeep, I think, is the labyrinth one. But this other one, you have to fight something like 4 or 5 bosses before you can even get to the guy. So it's honestly just more worth to hit up a friend or ask in the comments or something if somebody could just help you run all 3 of them at once in the Hall of Valor. So yeah, it's very hard for the intended level, because the intended level for here is level 40. So I mean, 3 bosses of 7 to 8k health, that's no fun. So yeah, and I mean, even in Ravenscar, there are still some tougher fights for level 40s. So there is that as well. Now, some of my highlights in Grizheim include the level 35 spells that you get from Eric Weirdrune, who is, you know, in the fort. I'll walk over to him. And then gaining entry to Winter Tusk at the end is also a highlight that I have, because, and I'll get into this later too, but Winter Tusk gives a lot of XP, so it's absolutely worth doing, in my opinion. So this is the guy that gives you your level 35 spells, assuming you have access to Miracom Keep, and for Death, for example, Dark Pact. This is the one that you get from the quest I Know a Guy that this guy gives. So would recommend doing Grizheim just for that. But yeah, my least favorite world. I guess, quick disclaimer, I don't hate any of these. Grizheim is still a cool place, but I just don't like playing through it, because gameplay is not fun and feels long. So yeah, those are my lowlights. So let's move on to number 18. Ah yes, wondrous Cocotopia, with all of its desert and sand. For Cocotopia, the story's alright, but you know, it is the second world in the game, so you know, you play through it a bunch, it starts to lose its novelty, and yeah, I'm just not a huge fan of Cocotopia. It is in dire need of a graphics overhaul. You see this little Mander walking around. He's got a new design, but then you look at everything around him, and yeah, you can kind of tell that this place needs touching up. So, and yeah, the gameplay is just not all that fun, because you know, you get 2 enemies per fight now in this world, so it's slow when you don't have an AoE. So just overall, not very fun. Some of the highlights, however, include the post-Crocosphinx and post-World spells. I believe I got Empower after the Crocus Sphinx. I could be wrong there. And then Plague came in somewhere in there too. So, you know, you get some useful utility spells from Croc. So that's always nice. But that's really the only highlight that I can think of. The lowlights being, as aforementioned, slow gameplay and badly in need of a graphics update. But overall, Cocotopia, it's not too bad. It's certainly short enough, so you don't get tired of it too quick. So, yep, let's move on to number 17. Celestia. Pre-Waterworks is unfathomably rough, even if you have your level 48 spell. The gameplay is slow and stale, again, because, you know, you don't have Waterworks yet. And, you know, I'm sure Crusty Rusty over here is, like, still recovering from the amount of Boots of Celestian Totality I had to feed him, so that's always fun. So, I mean, yeah, just a lot of bag clutter. Might as well give him some more. And, yeah, I mean, at least it gives you some good gold. And it's like, the whole world feels a little bit pointless. You know, you come here because Halston Baelstrom, the Storm Professor, says that an old colleague of his was trapped here. We come here looking for him, and then we get caught up going to all these different places, and then we go to the Crustacean Empire at the very end, which is useless in and of itself, but that is where we eventually find Thurston. So that's always fun to do. It just feels like a super pointless fetch quest. The lore's not all that great, in my opinion. It basically just boils down to the Storm Titan destroyed it, so that's cool. The pre-quest that used to exist with the Spiral Geographic Society was okay. It was hard, but but it gave the world a bit of character. Morganth came in at the start with that pre-quest rather than at the very, very end in the chancel. I just wish we could have seen more of her in this first world, the second arc. It feels a little bit like a prequel to Arc 2, but it's it's not all that great. So one of the highlights from this world for certain is the sun enchants. You get these, you know, fists that add base damage to your spell, which is really, really good. You can get strong, giant, monstrous, and gargantuan from here. So that's really cool. And then the lowlights include, as aforementioned, slow gameplay. Bosses crit a lot before you can get any block, so it's really just a dice roll if you either win a fight or you just get crit on and killed. So that's real fun. And then again, the whole world just feels kind of pointless. So I am not a fan of Celestia. Coming in at number 16 is Winter Tusk. I will say that the highlights include the XP. That is the whole reason why everybody does Winter Tusk, and yeah, it can be really, really helpful if you do it before Celestia, even though it's hard as hell to do. But it's worth it because it'll get you to level 50, it'll get you your rank 7 spell, and overall it's worth doing. And then, you know, the level 55 spells are also cool. I believe V-Plague is the one that Death got. Yeah, so it's certainly worth doing, but that doesn't mean I like much else about it. The lowlights of this world include the worst gameplay in the entire game. It's hard to even progress if you don't have good stats and like good base damage on your spells. And I mean, I'll tell you this much: if I have to fight one more Frostbones that puts on 3 tower shields and crits a 3-pip Frozen Kraken before I'm ready to hit, I'm going to punch a hole through my monitor. The infamous Azteca is one that I'm sure you expected to see sooner, but and I mean, you would be right to expect that, because, yeah, the reason why I'm not a fan of this world is it's kind of a no-brainer. The gameplay is bad. Waterworks is old by this point. And, you know, there's double bosses that appear honestly pretty frequently over on Zoltan Island, so that's no fun. And yeah, I mean, it's low damage output versus high health. I remember when I did this on my ice, I actually quit at level 83 somewhere on this island here because it was just so goddamn slow, and I would have to set up so much to be able to wipe out my opponents, you know, the bosses and all that with Frost Giant, and it was a pain in the ass. And the general length of the world is the second longest world in the game, so I mean, make of that what you will. So yeah, those are all the lowlights, and Azteca certainly has a bunch of them, but the highlights include the best end to the storyline of any world. I will say that, you know, the floating mountains like really picks up in the story department, and that's just it's honestly, it's really good storytelling just at the end there, and you know, I can really respect it. So yeah, I mean, the issues that I have are just that the gameplay is slow. Again, low damage output versus high health, so it's slow, and then a lot of people hate it for the obvious reasons. So my advice, if you are about to head to Azteca, good luck. These the Sun School trainers are another highlight. I already trained from them, but really important spells include Sharpened Blade, which is extremely good, and then Potent Trap, which is also really good because you can stack feints and blades once you get these spells, and that really helps out in the whole, you know, gameplay department, because, you know, once you get those spells, you can finally progress quickly. It's the health on the bosses is not as much of a problem if you have all that. So what the hell, you can go in here? What the hell, I didn't even know this was a thing. What the hell is this? Excuse me? Huh? What the okay, this has got to be a side quest. And upon seeing this, I'm kind of regretting putting Azteca low, because there are some parts of the world that are really damn cool. Damn, wow, I have never been inside this room in my life. Huh. How about that? I will be honest, y'all. The nostalgia of Wizard City was the main thing keeping this world in the top half, but then they had to go add all of the new, like, storyline quests with the first-time user experience, and I'll tell you this much, I am not as big of a fan of those as I was the original story, so yep, I'm gonna miss that. But yeah, I mean, the new story it's just a lot more goofy compared to what it used to be. There's not as much lore, and just overall it's not a great world anymore. The highlights are that it is short still, and the graphics are obviously, you know, amazing with the new 10-year anniversary update that really revamped the Wizard City graphics, and you know, I really like it all, so that's cool. And then yeah, the lowlights, according to my little Google Doc over here, it's just that it's not what it was, and for some people, you know, that's just how it's gonna be. The new storyline, I'm sure it has some merit for some people, but for me, I miss Private Quinn and the Fire Elves, man. That's all I'm gonna say on that. So Marley Bone comes in at the number 13 spot because, I mean, let's be honest, it's just a fetch quest. I don't really get the same enjoyment out of this world like many others do, and then obviously Pirates Marley Bone really just outshines this in every way. I'm also not really a fan of running on the rooftops. It used to be a lot worse with how the mobs would just pull you randomly off the street, which sucked, but I swear to you, man, sometimes I will try and cross the street and like a hooligan or whatever will just turn around and start pathing directly towards me, and I have to just dodge and weave to make sure I don't get pulled. And most of the time I end up running into another one who started pathing towards me anyway, so that's real fun. The highlights include that, you know, it's short, so I don't have to deal with this for too long. And then Moriarty is an interesting villain when the story is just at all focused on him. And that's kind of all I got. It's sort of just an interesting little world, but it's not my favorite. The lowlights include the fact that this is pre-Mount Olympus, so the gameplay is still slow, even if you have your AoE. And the whole reason we're here is also kind of pointless, because after Cocotopia, the Sergeant Major there tells us to come here to the Royal Museum because they had like the Croconomicon in a sarcophagus or something. And this motherfucker, Clancy motherfucking Pembroke, just straight tells us that we can't do shit. We can't get to the Croconomicon. We can't get to the book that, you know, the villain of the first arc is going to use to like destroy the Spiral or some bullshit. So yeah, he ended up being directly responsible for us having to do all of Marley Bone, all of Mushu, and all of Dragon Spire. So screw that guy. Coming in at the number 12 spot is going to be Mushu. I will say that Olympus Gear makes the gameplay here alright, but the storyline loses its novelty pretty quick when it was already one of the weaker ones from Arc 1. Yeah, I can't say I'm a fan of all the defeat and collect quests. Pirates, Mushu, like, it had a problem with, you know, running around a whole lot, and I mean, with Mushu, it's the same way. You have to just run for so long, and, you know, the teleporters, oftentimes, they don't even put you super close, so it's like, why do they even have them in some of these streets and all that? So it makes Mushu longer than it actually is. I think it's only a few quests longer than Marley Bone. I could be wrong there, but it certainly feels a lot longer than Marley Bone, just because of all of the running and defeat and collect quests and all that. So, and that's with Olympus gear too. So that's that's interesting. The highlights are the gameplay. Again, you know, Olympus unlocking pretty early on makes it pretty easy to progress here, which is always appreciated, and, you know, it's much more tolerable with that. So, yep, and the lowlights are, you know, artificial length with all the running. And then it's also got the same problem with Marley Bone's storyline, since we're focused on saving the Emperor the entire time. The Jade Champion has the Dragon Spire Spiral Key, but, you know, we can't even get in to see him because, you know, the Emperor's ill. So, he pretty much has us do all of this world just so he can tell us, like, oh, you know, Malister's already in Dragon Spire, good luck. So, I don't know, just not fun. Taking the 11th spot is Wisteria. Now, this is definitely a nice little breather from the first arc, and it pads you along to level 28 or 29 around there pretty easily, which allows you to go to Olympus before getting too far into Mushu. But it does get a little repetitive, and the characters aren't the most likable, but it is still short enough to where that's not much of a problem. And my highlights here are that it gives good XP at a crucial time. You can start this world after you finish Marley Bone, and, you know, it'll take you from level 25, 26 up to, you know, 28, 29, and that's a good spot to go to Mushu with, because you'll be able to get to Mount Olympus and get your better gear and make the first arc just a lot more bearable. So there is that. And then the lowlights. It can be slow despite the short story length, because you have Pegasus Place, and then you also have Tanglewood Way, and those are the only two areas in the world. So it's short, and the tournament aspect is really cool, but it still feels long, just because you have to. It's long for like a side world, you know what I mean? So if that makes any sense. Reaching the top 10, we have Caramel at the bottom spot. It's a nice little prequel to Arc 4. The story definitely didn't feel as good as the prior worlds, though. And yeah, I guess the best way I could really put it is that the storyline here felt a bit sterile. It just didn't have that magic that the third arc had, in my honest opinion. But regardless, I love the story concept, even if it is super ironic considering it's King's Isle we're talking about. And that is my main highlight of the world. Dragoon gear also makes this world much easier. So yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily hard. You can easily quest through it solo, which I appreciate, and yeah, it's pretty alright. The lowlights, although it didn't really feel like we accomplished much. It's the same issue as Celestia, where the whole world is basically just a side quest, and Dasein only makes quote-unquote one appearance as the final boss, and then that gets explained in the Loria pre-quest. So yeah, but I have seen a couple of the developers just straight out call this world a prequel to Arc 4. So, and I mean, it makes sense. We don't really do much except fight capitalism, which is always fun. So, yep, neat little world, but still not my favorite. It's gonna be right here in the middle of the ranking. Coming in at number 9, we have my favorite world from the first arc being Spire. Now, this was a climactic conclusion to the first arc, although it definitely needs a graphics update, as you can see by looking around the necropolis here. It's about the right length, I would say. It could definitely do without the 6 or 7 towers with all those floors, but it's a good world. It can be a bit slow due to not having sun enchants yet, but that's really about it. I mean, also, the weakness spell is no fun to deal with. It's still an okay world. I like the lore that it has. It's sort of got that, ruined type thing going on with it. Obviously, the Dragon Titan and Malastare being the big focus here. Yeah, I rate it. It's definitely not in my bottom half of the worlds in this game, so I think it's alright. Highlights again, good ending to the first arc, good story length, and then, I mean, okay, so I will say this much: the gameplay does make it a little on the slow side, just because things have a lot of health, and you still don't really have a whole lot of damage. You do have Olympus gear by this point, but you don't have the sun enchants that really speed up the game. So when you get into a tower like this, where there's like at least 4 floors of just mobs before you get to the bottom floor with the boss or whatever you need to get, it can be kind of goofy, just doing all that, and the mob fights just feel kind of pointless. So, yep. But I will definitely say it is my favorite world from the first arc. Next up, at the 8th spot, we have Lemuria. Now, this is a good world, honestly. Just Dasein being a much bigger part of this world was a good call, and the 8 heroes were cool too. The gameplay, however, was particularly rough with the spells that every mob seemed to have. I mean, All of the fire mobs seemed to have smoke screen. All the balance mobs had, you know, supernova and mana burn. It was a pain fighting those. The myth mobs had the stuns and all that. So yeah, the gameplay was pain. Even though you had really good stats by this point, it was still kind of rough to play through. But yeah, and then peak gameplay with Mothamon out in Mandoria. That fight just sucked ass. And I recently found out if you stagger join, he won't summon his minion. So, pro tip: get someone to help you, and then just stagger join on him, so that way you aren't stuck on him for multiple days. So yeah, and then the ice mobs, especially in the Fang of the Ancient one, those guys, those are the ones that just spam shields of every kind for some reason. And when you're going into that dungeon, I would genuinely recommend packing Shrike just to deal with that. So yeah, that's no fun there. But that being said, my highlights here are the storyline, the characters, with the 8 heroes and Dasein, and then, you know, Heap in general is just one of my favorite areas in the game. Really love it. So it's a good world. And then the lowlights, again, it's the gameplay. The difficulty is close to Winter Tusk. Except, you know, you have good stats this time. So yeah, good luck if you're getting to this world, because it is definitely a difficult one. Now, I was thinking about putting Novus a little higher, and then I remembered Mario. Mario exists. So yeah, this world had by far the best Dasein appearances, and, you know, Mubu was an amazing character, and I highly recommend you play a side quest after you finish Stone Heaven. But the fluff in between all of that wasn't all that great. It had the same aspects of the Caramel story that I wasn't a fan of, but anytime Dasein was on screen, it was some of the best storytelling in the game thus far, and the ending was the best end to a world story since Azteca, and that is high praise. I'll say that much. I really like the ending with Manticore, even though it was a little rushed, but I thought it was fine. So yeah, I mean, the whole one of my favorite quotes from Dasein is like, "What is the point of being good if no one else is?" And that is a quote that is a quote that has stuck with me. Bravo, Dasein. But yep, the highlights include, you know, Dasein, the new gear and the new game mechanics, with, you know, Arch Mastery and all that. I actually like that. Fight me on it, even though it kind of isn't. It doesn't really work all that great, but hey, I still like it. But the lowlights include, you know, most of the other characters and their petty ass war taking up most of the runtime. I mean, the Puerto Nuevo storyline was honestly just the worst out of that, and it was just, yeah, I mean, the whole war thing, I hope they don't do that again. Best case scenario, Wallaroo is even better, and who knows, maybe it'll manage to break into my top 5. The sort of end of arc worlds seem to do that, or have done that in recent years. So yep, Novus is a good world, but not without its flaws. With Zafaria coming in at number 6, I will say that I was honestly a huge fan of just the theme. And the gameplay is just about perfect, with Waterworks having been close to the beginning of the world. You've got an actual purpose here, and, you know, Morgant's effects on the different peoples of Zafaria are shown throughout the world. So there's that. Earthquake, however, is more common here than any other world, though, so that's not super fun to deal with. But yeah, my highlights include the storyline, the gameplay, and the overall length of the world. And my lowlights include, you know, parts of the world can be boring, with the Greyhorn Mercenary quests, for example. I don't know how many there are, counting main and side, but I feel like there's more Greyhorn Mercenary quests than, like, any other specific mob in the entire game. So Yeah, there's so many memes about the Greyhorn mercenaries, and for good reason. So that can be a little slow, but the rest of the world is really, really good and deserves its spot at number 6. Starting off our top 5, we have the world of Mirage. I would say that after all of the nerfs that have happened over the years, the difficulty in Mirage is just about right. The storyline's good, and that insane plot twist with Xerxes being the Scorpion needs to be studied. Even more so when you realize the whole fight you just thought was super important was really just a trick to take everyone's eyes off Ali Baboon, who stole Istar, who knows about the Jane conspiracy, which then leads to the whole Iran Palace questline, and that's the whole thing. And it just keeps going. And like that's one of my favorite parts about Mirage. Just when you thought the story couldn't get better, it just does. Yeah, I always love coming here. Whenever I'm making a new character, I mean it's just a cool world. It definitely does the desert theme much better than Cocotopia in my opinion. So my highlights include the storyline, the characters that you meet. Some people, you know, have mixed feelings about Istar, who is actually not here anymore. I guess they finally removed her in a patch recently. But there's also Sultana Sharzad. Ozzy is one of my favorite characters just in the game entirely. And yeah, I mean the Mirage crew, it's just they're all really good characters. And then the gameplay, you know, Darkmoor gear is still meta at this point in time, so it's good. And the gameplay is still really fun, even though you are sort of approaching Blade into AoE territory. But regardless, Mirage is a very good world and deserves its spot in the top 5 here. So, I bet some of you didn't really expect to see this so early, but Polaris is, in my opinion, an amazing introduction to Arc 3, and it is universally loved for good reasons. Darkmoor gear makes the gameplay a breeze, and the first part of the storyline where you start the Penguin Revolution is always fun. It's always so nice to just liberate the penguins every time I come through here, so yep, that's always fun. And then the second part where you chase the rat and to go into the Arcanum for the first time is also really fun. And it's definitely one of the highlights just of the third arc in general. And then Spider as a villain is arguably the most interesting of the first 3, so his involvement in the Polaris story is pretty notable too. And this is also where we begin to doubt Raven, and that leads to one of the best plot points in the game down the line. Because, you know, Grandmother Raven, all this time you thought she was, you know, she was your narrator, she was just the pinnacle of, you know, good in the world, and then Polaris comes around and, you know, you go into the Sunless Shrine, and you start to realize, oh, you know, maybe Raven's not so great after all. And then, you know, you on Tarek's Arcanum quest, he sends you to pick up a bunch of tusks for him to study, and then in one of the caves, you know, Raven tells you, like, piss off, you are fucking with shit you shouldn't be. Mortals should not know this. So yeah, it's like it really makes you wonder, what is Raven hiding? And, you know, you find out as you go down the line, and that's really cool. And yeah, that really just makes one of my highlights of this world, with the others being obviously the gameplay, the quick XP, and the new spells. Except it's real ironic that I'm talking about this on my Death Wizard, because Winged Sorrow sucks shit. But, you know, for other schools like my main, Ice, Snowball Barrage is a lifesaver. But yeah. And for my lowlights, the reason why I'm in the River of Frozen Tears today is because of these hoes right here. Because Polaris is where fights start to get more annoying as opposed to tedious, and there's a few mobs that I think of when I say this. The Numbskull Ogre's pretty much given me an early taste of what's to come in Lemuria, so that's really fun. But, yep, and then some of the characters from this world are also cool. Zoot, before they turned him into, like, some diet Frenchman, was really an interesting character. He would definitely be a stoner if he was real, so shout out to Zoot. Coming in third, we have Imperia, and for a two-parter, this was definitely very well made. Part 1 was the first max level world that I made it to max on, like, in my life. So I've got a lot of nostalgia associated with that. And then Part 2 was also really well written, and I love how involved Raven and Spider became in that part of the story. And we had things like the aeroplanes and the Helena plotline. Those were super interesting. We got to learn more about Ione and Spark and all that. And then the climactic ending to the arc was probably my favorite thus far, with Raven and Spider in the husk, and I thought that was great. The final fight against the Ether Titan was just epic beyond belief. It's the only fight of its kind in the entire game, so I mean it's becoming that giant divine paradox and fighting that giant amalgamation of a Titan. That was peak. That was one of my favorite parts of the game just ever. So, shout out to the writers for that. Shout out to the curator. Speaking of the curator, the Nexus is a really fun spot. Which, it's a tiny little island, but I mean, just look at it. It looks so great. I will say that much. So yeah, shout out to King's for making this location, because this looks so nice. Although, walking around is a little tough. But my highlights include the storyline, the gameplay, the characters, and the overall lore of the world. Pork, Spark, and Beans, those were good characters. Then all the side characters as well. Like Mallory really came into her own in this world. Like that was real fun to see. And then we also had the Calamar in Mandala, and those guys were just chill with everything. It was so fun going there. And then you had the dwarves, both in Athenor and the aeroplanes. Those were cool too. The Vanitas and Vicereign story along with Helena, that was a really cool story. So yeah, just Imperia, just an amazing world. Really, really great. And I hope, Wallaroo is able to beat it. So I got high expectations. But the lowlights were that it felt a little bit slow at times, and I wasn't really a fan of the whole Dark Cloud plotline in Nimbus and the aeroplanes. But, it was alright. I can look past it because the rest of the world was just that good. Coming in second, we have Chrysalis, and this is just one of the best worlds in terms of writing. It's a long world, but you feel like you're constantly accomplishing things as you go along. The story of the Burrowers is really good. Dibum's a great character, and one of the most universally loved, I might add. Exploring the lore of the world is really intriguing. The Eclipse Tower storyline is amazing. Zaltana secretly being part of the Fifth Golem is one of my favorite plot points. And, I mean, that's just part 1, Like, part 2 had Taylor Coleridge, who I thought was a funny character. And then seeing what Morganth did to the Radiant Alcazar genuinely got me down my first time around. So bringing it back as Radiance Reborn was done so well. And then, Sardonyx had a cool storyline. Turning all the Mantises against Morganth made me feel so accomplished. Especially after the general sentiment that I saw in part 1 and all that. And then the Conda Desert and Solar Arc were cool, and they did a good job of building hype there. And then the Hive, where we meet Old Cobb, was so good, and it was the start of an amazing storyline. the final battle in the Shadow Palace was so good, and you know, we got we got left on this huge cliffhanger for Arc 3 when Cobb did his thing in Bastion. So, yep. Overall, just an amazing, amazing world. And you know, my highlights include the story, the lore, and all of the characters. I mean, because it felt like in every part of the world we had like somebody who was just like a really, really good character. Like even in the Conda Desert, the Desert Hoppers were so fun because you know they were all like Australian and all that. And that was super fun. And they really made that part of the world really, really enjoyable. So yeah. A lot of people don't like Chrysalis because of its length, and that is my main low light here. But for me, it doesn't feel too long because you know you're constantly getting stuff done, and you know what's not to love about that. But yeah, I mean Chrysalis, it's so good. I feel like it's really, really overhated. I think a lot of people do like the story aspect of it, but not so much the length. And you know that's totally fair because it is 277 quests. So I don't blame anybody who doesn't like it because of the length. But yeah, overall, just really good world in Chrysalis here. So big ups to the devs for that. Now, it's not the most creative pick, and maybe it's just me, but the theme of the world of Avalon was really, really good. It hardly mattered to me that we weren't really after Morganth here, and the world's standalone story was amazing. Ghost Avalon is probably still my favorite dungeon of all time, and remember, you know, Tartarus, Grand Chasm Past, and Zeruvan Grotto all exist, so that's high praise. And I might have to do a video on my favorite dungeons in the game, so stay tuned for that. I might have to think about it for a little while. The Pendragon being Artorias was also a crazy plot twist. So, I mean, because I always thought he was dead. So, getting there on my first run through was just amazing, and it was marvelously done. And I've also got a lot of nostalgia associated with this world. This was the furthest I ever made it on my original account. So every time I made it to the outer yard on my current account, it felt like a huge milestone because it was like I was past where I got stuck when I was a kid. So yeah, I mean it was amazing. I love Avalon, and like a lot of people do as well. You'll see a bunch of people have this as their number one, so, but I mean rightfully so, right? Waterworks is still decently new, and you can craft better gear in Dundara if you feel like it, so the gameplay is still great as well. And then the utility spells that you get from Avalon, those are also really nice. Even though some of them are useless, it's still unique that we got utility spells as opposed to the usual high pip hits. I know Death got Mass Infection, which is kind of good, I guess. But Death also got Bad Juju, which is such a good utility spell in PvE, so go crazy. And then honestly, you know, the length of the world, it's just right, like Dragonspire was, so you never really get bored of it, and that's a big thing with these. Some of these worlds overstay their welcome, and they suffer on this list as a result. My highlights of this world are just everything, and my lowlights are nothing, because, you know, it's there to hate about Avalon, right? Except the fishing quest, but that's that's aside, so wouldn't worry about it. But yeah, very good world. A lot of people have this as their number one, and it's honestly pretty easy to see why. Well, team, sorry the video was super duper long, but I'm just passionate about the worlds in this game, and it really does have a good story, so if you're one of those who just spams the spacebar, I would highly recommend stopping and smelling the roses for once on your next playthrough. So, yep, thank you all for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave like 50 comments for the algorithm. I've been Ice Gold. Peace out, y'all.